Today, we're diving into the story of a man who built a global empire not with spreadsheets and PowerPoints, but with a philosophy that sounds almost, well, silly, fun. We're talking about Sir Richard Branson, the guy who proved that your personality isn't just some soft skill, it's a deadly competitive weapon. So how did he do it? How did he manage to turn play into pure profit? Well, let's get into it.
Okay, just picture this. It's 1984. The airline industry is this massive fortress run by giants like British Airways. It's an old boys club, all about logistics, regulations, and tons of cash. The customer? Yeah, they were pretty much an afterthought. And then, out of nowhere, comes this guy, Richard Branson. He's not an aviation expert. He runs a record label called Virgin, and he wants in. And his big plan to take on the giants? One single leased plane. The entire industry didn't just laugh, they were insulted. They thought he was a total joke, and they figured, you know what? He'll be bankrupt in 6 months. Tops.
So, that's the big question, right? How did this one guy with one plane go up against an entire empire and win? I mean, it obviously wasn't about money. He had pennies compared to them. And it wasn't about experience. He was a total outsider. The answer is so much deeper. It's all in a personal philosophy he developed. This worldview that was shaped by a pretty unconventional youth that let him completely rethink what business even means. He didn't see it as a war you win with spreadsheets. He saw it as an adventure, a game you play with creativity, personality, and yeah, a little bit of mischief. He didn't just play by different rules. He tore up the rulebook and wrote his own.
To really get how he pulled this off, we're going to break down his journey piece by piece. First, we'll dig into that reckless gamble. Then, we're going to hit rewind and look at his unlikely origin story to see where these rebellious ideas came from. After that, we'll reveal the 3 pillars of the Branson Method itself. We'll look at how he turned adventure into an actual system, check out his legacy as a serial disruptor, and finally, we'll talk about how you can use these exact same ideas in your own work. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the reckless gamble. To get Branson, you have to get the launch of Virgin Atlantic. This wasn't just about adding a new flight from London to New York. No, this was a statement. It was this loud rock and roll declaration of war on the boring, gray, lifeless experience of flying back then. This was his moment, the point of no return, where he bet literally everything, including his beloved record company, on one single crazy idea. See, Branson understood something absolutely critical. He couldn't outspend British Airways. It was impossible. They had more planes, more routes, more everything. So he didn't even try to play their game. He completely changed the game. He decided to compete on the one thing they could never buy: personality. He made himself the adventurer, the rebel, the living, breathing symbol of the Virgin brand. Suddenly, the strategy wasn't about logistics anymore. It was about telling a great story. It was about turning a boring flight into an event, and a business launch into a global spectacle the media absolutely could not ignore. But a mindset this different, it doesn't just appear out of thin air. To really get the method, you gotta get the man. And to get the man, we have to go all the way back to the beginning. His whole approach wasn't cooked up in some business school classroom. Nope, it was forged in personal struggle. It was born out of pure necessity. This is Section 2, an unlikely origin. Branson's secret weapon actually came from his biggest weakness, severe dyslexia. The normal classroom, for him, it was a nightmare of text and rules he just couldn't process. So at 16, he dropped out. This forced him to develop a completely different way of operating in the world. While other kids were learning to follow rules in a book, he was learning to read people. While they were learning to climb a corporate ladder, he was building a network based on trust. He couldn't rely on long memos, so he got really good at just talking to people, face to face. The system taught everyone else to follow the rules. His dyslexia taught him to find the loopholes. It wasn't a business strategy he chose. It was a survival tactic that just happened to become a world-changing business philosophy.
And you can literally see these core principles taking shape in his earliest businesses. His student magazine, that was less a magazine and more a megaphone for rebellious ideas. His first real experiment in building a brand that stood for something. Then his mail-order record business, which was built on this clever tax loophole that let him undercut the big stores. His first big lesson in how to beat the system. And maybe most important, because he couldn't handle the details, he mastered delegation from day one. He got great at finding smart people and just letting them run with it. These weren't just businesses, they were his real-world MBA.
So after all these years of real-world trial and error, what started as a bunch of survival tactics began to harden into a real conscious philosophy. And that brings us to Section 3, the Branson Method revealed. This is it. This is the synthesis of everything he learned. It's the secret weapon that was forged from his struggles, his rebellious spirit, and his early hustles. This is the operating system that would power every single thing that came next.
The method is built on three simple yet totally radical pillars. First, the main idea: turn play into profit. Second, the cultural engine, the smile test. And third, the secret sauce that makes it all work, the Anti-Bureaucracy Mandate. Now, these aren't just feel-good slogans for a poster. They are a systematic rejection of everything that makes big companies slow and boring. Let's start with number one.
Pillar number one is turning play into profit. And what this really means is taking the one thing that every other company is terrified of, risk, and turning it into your most powerful marketing tool. For Branson, launching an airline wasn't just a numbers decision. It was a chance to tell an amazing story, a public adventure. I mean, why spend $10 million on a boring ad campaign when you can try to cross the Atlantic in a hot air balloon and get $100 million in free press? That's the genius of the method. You turn business risk into a media spectacle, and every time you do it, you reinforce that the Virgin brand is daring, fun, and human. Pillar number two, the smile test. Sounds deceptively simple, but in practice, it's revolutionary. The idea is put your employees first, always. Not just as a slogan, but as the absolute center of your business strategy. Branson's logic here is just rock solid. You can't have happy, loyal customers if you have miserable, disengaged employees. It's just impossible. He knew that the only place real innovation and amazing customer service comes from is a culture where people are genuinely happy and empowered. For him, the most important customer is always the person who works for him. If they're smiling, the profits take care of themselves.
Okay, and pillar number three is what makes the first two even possible, the Anti-Bureaucracy Mandate. This is basically Branson's famous allergy to corporate nonsense, turned into a core business rule. It's a relentless war on anything that slows you down. Pointless meetings, complicated hierarchies, soul-crushing paperwork. By keeping his team small, quick, and radically decentralized, Virgin can move like a startup, even though it's a massive global company. This is the real secret to how one brand can be in music, airlines, banking, and space travel. It's because they refuse to act like one giant slow-moving corporation.
So we have the philosophy, but a philosophy without a system is just a nice idea, right? That brings us to section 4, adventure as a system. This is where we get into the how. We're going to see that Branson's love of adventure wasn't just some personal hobby. It was a highly calculated, repeatable strategy designed for maximum impact.
This is where the method becomes a machine. All those famous, life-threatening stunts, crossing oceans in balloons, trying to fly around the globe, those weren't just the random acts of a billionaire with a death wish. No, they were part of a highly calculated system, the high-leverage media stunt. Branson did the math. He knew that one spectacular adventure would get the world's attention for weeks, generating way more brand awareness than a $100 million ad budget ever could. It was brilliant marketing, just disguised as pure adventure. The genius of this system is how efficient and powerful it is. Think about it. A full-page ad in a newspaper runs for one day and then it's gone. But the story of Richard Branson, the underdog, nearly dying while chasing a world record, that story gets told for decades. It becomes a legend. Not only is it way more cost-effective, but it does something advertising can never do. It creates an emotional connection between you and the brand. Every single one of those stunts was basically a free, global commercial for Virgin's core values: courage, adventure, and a refusal to be born.
Now, the second system is less flashy, but it's just as important: radical delegation. And this goes right back to his childhood. Because he was never good with the nitty-gritty details, he made a discipline out of letting go. He systematically delegates almost all of the day-to-day operations to CEOs and teams that he trusts completely. Now, this isn't him being lazy. It's a strategic choice. It frees him up to focus only on the two things he believes a founder should do: steer the big-picture vision and be the chief protector of the brand's culture. Without this ruthless delegation, there's no way he could manage such a massive and diverse empire.
So what happens when you combine this radical philosophy with these incredibly smart systems? Well, you get one of the most amazing business legacies of the last century. Section 5, the disruptor's legacy. We're not just talking about a list of companies here. We're talking about a permanent shift in how people think about building a brand.
Just look at this timeline. It tells the whole story. In the 70s, he takes on the music industry.
In the 80s, the airline industry. The 90s, transportation. And in the 2000s, he decides to take on space. I mean, think about those industries. Music, airlines, trains, and space travel. They have almost nothing in common, except for one thing. They were all dominated by huge, slow, boring giants who were just waiting for someone faster, more creative, and a whole lot more fun to come along and shake things up.
And that's his ultimate legacy. He proved to the whole world that these so-called soft values are actually the most powerful weapons in business. He showed everyone that personality, fun, and a people-first culture, they aren't just nice things to have. They can be scaled into a multi-billion-dollar competitive advantage. He basically wrote the playbook for every modern disruptor, showing that you don't beat giant companies by becoming another giant company. You beat them by being everything they're not: fast, human, and adventurous.
So, what does this all mean for you? It's easy to just look at this as a story about a one-of-a-kind billionaire. But the real power of the Branson Method is that anyone can use it. Its core ideas can be applied to your work, your team, or your next big project, like starting today. Which brings us to our final section, your turn to play.
Here are 3 quick ways to start using the method right now. First, reframe your risks. Think about the biggest challenge you're facing. Instead of stressing about it, ask yourself, how can I turn this into an adventure? How can I make this a story worth telling? Second, use the smile test. Before your next big meeting, check in with your team. Are they energized? Are they happy? If not, fix that first. Your internal culture is your most important product. And third, delegate the details. Be ruthless. Make a list of all the tasks that drain your energy and find someone who loves doing them. Your focus is your most valuable asset, so guard it with your life.
When you boil it all down, Richard Branson built his entire empire on one simple, powerful truth. Fun in business isn't a distraction from the serious work. It is the serious work. It's the ultimate source of profit. The Branson Method proved that being agile, keeping your people happy, and having a spirit of adventure, these aren't just nice ideas. They are the sharpest tools you have for taking on the big, boring giants.
Because his commitment to audacity teaches us a rule that applies not just to building a company, but to building a life. And that rule is simple. Life is just too short to be boring in business.